in Connecticut.
Right.
Maybe
Oh,
95?
That's
I was gonna say,
That's the only
I
one,
could
right?
tell you a couple probably, but yeah, anywhere getting stuck, coming.
And hi Amy. Has everyone reviewed the minutes from last meeting?
No.
No.
I thought they were spectacular.
Okay.
I thought you did a fantastic job.
Does anyone?
Yes, I have. I have.
Okay, then let's, motion to accept the minutes from 3/27/24.
So move.
So
Second,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor?
Abstain.
Okay,
I wasn't here,
that's
so I
fine.
can't.
Yep, yep, okay. And, okay, the next item on our agenda is Titan Energy.
Okay, and so what we've done is we've invited Adam here, Adam, Tip.
Yep.
Adam
So-
Pesh.
So Adam, why don't you introduce yourself? Well, should we introduce ourselves?
Sure, yeah, we could do
Let's
that.
do that first, okay? Chris, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'm Chris Kinsella, I'm on the Board of Selectmen.
Sergey Fedorchenko.
And Amy Van, and I think we're all from cultural district, and I
Yep.
also serve on the board of finance.
Hey, Peter Jensen, I'm on this committee alone.
Corinna Fleming, Solar Committee.
Melissa Lopes Recreation Commission.
Greg Marlowe, planning and zoning.
So you see who we have, the selectmen, finance, recreation and planning and zoning. And
There'll be a quiz later. I was gonna say.
And you have another member on Zoom on the Owl.
Yeah.
Yes, we have
We
Bailey.
also have someone on the
Bailey.
infrastructure committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so what that means is there's a lot of different constituencies.
Good. That's super helpful actually, because more everybody's in sync with each other, the better. I think we're all true. So, really nice to meet everybody and appreciate you having me today. I'll pass these around and we can go through these, but in the meantime, I'll just give you a little background on who I am.
Adam, do you have a PDF that you can email to me? Of your
You could, he'll email to me because I think you only have mine and
Yeah.
Chris's email.
Well, Peter,
And
thank
then-
you. Peter, thank you so much. But Peter, thank you. I was just hoping that if he had it on a on a device of some kind, maybe his phone, he could email it to me and I could go through it.
You don't have it now. I'm sorry.
Are
Excuse-
you, Daily, when are you out of town?
No, as a matter of fact, I would have been there in town hall. I'm just up the road.
Okay, I can, get a copy and get it to you. And I'd like one other copy for, Melissa. I mean,
Emily.
Right. Thanks very much, Chris. No, I was just hoping that since Adam might have it right on his phone right now. You never know.
Let me try. Hang tight, hang tight, so. Who's looking? Let's see, let me see.
Where's this next beautiful picture from?
Ask my marketing department. They will tell you. Okay, so let's see, so. Let me. Right, so. I can forward this if you.
Yeah, that's great. How
share-
about just texting it to me? I'll give you the number. It's short, right?
I don't know if I can send a PDF over a text. I think email would probably be the way to
That's fine.
ensure that I
I'll
get.
spell it for you now. It's my
Okay.
name, DALY REV as in Victor, ILLE at Gmail.
All right,
Thank you so
it
much for
should
your
be en route.
Thank you so much. Let me get another device.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Appreciate it, Adam.
Yep, absolutely.
I came back, I was there for attendance.
So, Chris,
I should be.
where, you're gonna, it's long,
Yeah.
it's hard for a senior.
Yeah, okay, I think we're done with that, so,
It's cool. I'll get back to it. So my name's Adam Seth, I'm the general manager of Titan Gen. Through Titan Energy, we manage the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities Renewable Energy Program. So the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, for those, you've heard CCM before. Really what that is, it's the single biggest municipal organization here in the state. They basically, they advocate for municipalities on a whole host of different issues. And then they also have services that they offer to their clients. They put out an RFP of their own a couple of years ago to select an energy management company to work with their members directly, and basically all things energy. So Titan was selected about 5.5 years ago, and then we just entered into another 5-year extension with them. So it's been a good relationship for a long time, and municipalities, I think, are generally pretty keen to use outside services for projects like this, simply because chances are you've probably not gone through extensive solar procurement in the past, or you have some expertise, maybe like on a residential side for one of you has solar on your roof at home. That can kind of help get the process moving, but to have a resource really to help conduct a thorough RFP project management from start to finish, that's the purpose of the CCM program.
Say it one more time.
Sure.
The purpose.
The purpose of the program is to give municipalities a resource to fully manage a project. And that's everything from, typically most towns need to put out RFPs if you want to do a project, right? That's a big part of it. Getting through that process, and then there's getting through the contracting, we select a vendor, the incentives, securing those, and then the implementation of the project. So there's a few concrete steps that go from basically where we are today, thinking about what do we want to do, how we get there, to see finished product. So that's really, we are here to be the resource for that.
It's not to be a vendor.
Right.
It's to be the liaison during the process to technically advise and guide.
Exactly. So basically think of us as like resource that literally, figuratively, will sit here at the table with you to guide you through what kind of projects do you want to do. Obviously, for me, a big part of it is understanding what the town's goals are. Yeah. And then melding that with our experience and what works, what doesn't, how to use these programs to the best advantage, best practices in terms of contracting with a vendor. These are all things that, we've probably done this, 50 to 60 times at this point for different towns. So bringing that experience to the table to help make sure that you get a good finished product at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. So you don't have to be your own meeting.
Are you ever a vendor or strictly consultant?
Strictly consultant. We don't build, we're not a solar companies typically referring themselves as EPC companies. We're not.
Okay.
That really gives you a more of a objective perspective to some degree.
Yeah, we're agnostic as to what vendor ultimately gets selected, provided you meet some eligibility criteria. Yeah, I want somebody to learn on you. But luckily, there's a pretty good, years that operate here. The industry is fairly mature at this point. We're going back to 2008 or so when these programs really took root. So you have a lot of companies that have operate here in Connecticut that have been at this beginning. So you generally have pretty good choices as long as kind of basic guidelines for vendors that may not have municipal experience or experience with the particular kinds of projects that you want to build or explore. So, but again, helping evaluate like when those options come in and synthesizing that into a report that everybody can understand. That's another function of our job.
Where's Titan located?
We're in Hartford. So Titan was founded about 20 years ago. I've been with Titan for 13 years. We've been doing this specifically for the last 8 years. So, we like to think we're Connecticut's kind of our family. It's a small. We know these programs well, so and municipal solar has been really a key driver how the state has met its, or it's seeking to meet its renewable energy goals. And a lot of the programs that are in place are actually, and they have municipalities in mind when they create these programs, so. It's, they're not without their perks, if you will. I mean, the incentive programs aren't perfect, but they're give you a really good leg up if you're serious about doing this. So,
I have a question. How does Titan make its money?
yeah, so we have an arrangement with CCM. Yeah. No, that's perfectly appropriate question. So we have a relationship with CCM where when we put out an RFP for project management.
Who's CCM?
The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're basically, we, in a sense, like we work for them and they're work for their members.
And what number?
Yeah, so town or Canaan Falls Village here, imagine, I mean, everything's going to do great. So there's a project management fee that gets put into the RFP itself. It's about 5% of the project cost. The vendor is responsible for paying the Titan CCM project management fee. If a few things happen, there's certain milestones that go with that. So we run the process and you enter into an agreement with the vendor and we get an incentive award from Eversource. Step one. So basically it's like 33%. So when we get the contract agreed to and signed and we get the incentive, that's the first milestone. Second milestone is getting the project to being shovel ready. So all your approvals are in place with the utility, locally or state, etc. And then the final milestone is when the project gets permission to operate from Eversource. So depending on the size of the project and the complexities, I mean, this could be 18 to 36 month process. And we're in it, like in it to win it with you along the way. And part of the reason that the program is structured this way, I think CCM really pushed for this, was that they want to give towns a resource to get started, or even if we go through the process, we want the RFP, the results come back and you can all look at me and say this is overwhelming or just with our goals, whatever the case might be. You're completely free to walk in the process at that point. You're only committed to the project when you execute an agreement with the vendor, whichever vendor that might be, and for whichever project you ultimately select.
Thank you.
Sure. You contract away from municipalities, you just Titan work with in the private sector?
Yeah, we do. This just happens to be one of the, I mean, the CCM, so much of like the way the incentives are structured and we kind of ask that, well, who's, what kinds of locations are natural fit for solar? I mean, schools generally, typically you've got flat roofs, there's an educational component. It's still probably going to be a school in 20 years, population shifts kind of come and go, but generally speaking, municipalities are not in the business of, flipping properties every couple of years. They generally are really good at driving down costs. That's usually key interest in municipalities. So there's a lot about the municipal space that meshes well with solar, but we do a lot of work with commercial and industrial customers too. We do a lot of work with landowners. Basically doing the same thing for them, but kind of representing them in the market, kind of looking almost like a realtor, a homeowner. So it's varied, but the municipal side of it's by 65% of what I do in a given day.
So in the private sector, you're more involved in, I guess, promoting it and
Basically do the same thing. Same thing for private sector. It's, the process is basically the same. The need is generally the same, which is, hey, I want to do this. I don't want to figure it out as a
Slightly different structure because you have this incentive thing for towns.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference really is that there's some like peculiarities or advantages to the incentive rule book, if you will, that favor municipalities, but generally the process is the same. Whoever will.
When you say on page 2 here, the 70,000 meter managed on amount of spend managed, are you actually managing that? I mean,
So
what do you mean by that?
yes, so we can go through this for sure. I usually generally like to just kind of kick it off conversationally and then
Okay.
kind of go through here. But Titan Energy does a lot more than just the renewable energy side of things.
Okay,
I just happen to manage that side of the business.
Okay, gotcha.
Really, page one here is just kind of a general company snapshot of like.
Of the different things, this being one of them, this being
Yeah.
many of the other. things.
Yeah, so when in terms of like key stats, right? So like one of the core functions of Titan is we manage electricity, natural gas purchasing for municipalities, commercial, industrial, et cetera. So it's really just a stat of, not just locally here, but we are a national company too. The number of customers we have, the number of electricity or natural gas meters that are under our management for that supply side of the business. So that's really kind of what that's speaking
I
to.
see.
And then in terms of other things, there's energy efficiency, the charging division, data management. So these are, if I had all of my colleagues here with me today, speak to some of these different disciplines that we have, but
Okay. Well, we can focus on ours.
yeah.
Mhm.
Flip the second page. The process for procuring renewables is, it's obviously more complicated than just 5 easy steps and got solar, right? But they're generally, they fall into kind of 5 categories of tasks that we normally undertake for a typical engagement like this. So, it's kind of think about step one. I mean, understanding goals are, things you're working with, kind of land you're working with, utility data that helps for a size of the system here or there, all that kind of initial information gathering is kind of general step one. Once we get to an agreement on what the scope like and what utility programs can support, get the RFP issued, do vendor walkthroughs, all that fun stuff that goes into the RFP itself. When the results come in, we write an analysis of bids so we can share with you, okay, this is your option, these are your options, pros, cons, talk about the relative strength and weaknesses of vendors that are proposing, etc. Timelines, basically all the information that you need to be up to speed to say like, okay, I feel confident enough to engage with a vendor from this process and enter into a contract with them. Getting through that contracting phase, I always recommend that if towns have a municipal attorney, usually most small towns, don't necessarily have someone sitting in town hall who serves a function, but if you have an attorney that you've used for other contract negotiation, yeah. If the attorney that works for the town has experience with this, I can certainly make recommendations to different attorneys that I've worked with who represent other towns that you could talk to,
That
but
have experience.
yeah, specifically with solar
Yeah.
contracts, because I've seen at times, if an attorney's never seen a contract for solar before, sometimes they kind of bring their experience with other things to the table, and sometimes things get a little jumbled. So, however you guys deal with that, I just always recommend, I'm not an attorney. We are not attorneys at Titan, so having an attorney review those contracts is always a smart idea. And then presumably, you get to the contract phase, signed, sealed, you get the incentives in place, vendors working to get the utility approvals, interconnection approvals, all that jazz. We get to the point where the project gets built, and then from there we usually we do about our average is 12-month. We're still here to make sure that you're getting what you thought you were going to get out of the project. So
On
that's
this step 5.
yeah. So track, it's kind of just the measurement and verification step where
You got what you paid.
yeah, it's working as it should. Everybody's happy. Whole thing, it's kind of like an extended project closeout, if you will. Yeah, so that's generally how the process goes, and depending on the size and complexity of the RFP, the amount of time that can take can vary.
I see, between step 2 and step 3 and step 4 and even to step 5, that's kind of simple step that I understand really clearly. Issuing RFPs, reviewing that contract and all that goes. But between step 1 and step 2, analyzing what our mission, our goals would be, our mission would be here, then understanding what our facilities are, understanding what our needs are in electricity generation, and then designing an array or a solar generation power plant effectively. That seems very complex.
You aren't designing the array in the first step. You're just creating your criteria for the RFP.
Typically, what I would add to that is typically when we're going through this kind of step one phase, and we have a set of locations or location that you think, okay, this is where we want it. We put together initial layouts so we could share with you, okay, this is what it would do for you. This is what it would look like. And then as part of the RFP package, we'd include that. We leave it up to the vendors to say, look, this is like the guideline of what the town's looking for. If you're seeing the project a different way, you can certainly propose this, and like, if you have other ideas, feel free, but we give you a set of initial layouts as part of it.
But this step one is establishing that layout, that criteria that says to the vendors, these are their goals, these are what they have to work with.
Well, I would take it was one step further than that. So basically, I would say, like, let's take
That's one.
yeah, it's one. So we would put together, not just like the plan, but the initial system layout too. So you will see that. This is not the down.
Mhm.
And then, when we put out the RFP, the vendors have that as a guideline to use to.
And then also, let's say how much power we require.
Well,
Let's
and
say,
that's also
yeah.
with the utility bills.
Yeah.
Going through, analyzing, and also part of my job is to educate you as a group as to what the utility incentives actually do, how they're structured, and what they're, how that guides my recommendation to you is, okay, what should you be thinking about in terms of, where the bang for your buck is. The utility programs are basically, they're just a public policy creation, and there's rules that, sometimes they're like, all right, well, that's what the rules are. They're not necessarily intuitive at times. So bringing everybody up to speed on, like, okay, so, what's doable relative to what the utilities are allowing, I think is helpful. I mean, collectively make a decision about, what might be best for the town.
Well, I mean, are we going to just figure out what our real goals are here? Are we, I guess,
Well, I mean, we're gonna
eliminate
list-
all electric bill?
Well, no, if we hire
Yeah.
or secure
Yeah.
or get you to join us, I think you will be giving us a set of questions that we'll have to, I assume.
I could tell you exactly what to look for in town. I mean, you guys know your town way better than I do.
I mean, establishing our goals.
Sure. Yeah, I'm getting it, like it's.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I've been listening to all of this. So would your company, of the town, we have all of these little plots of land, just for little plots for whatever. Do you help determine the best location of the solar array, whether it's the school or the farm or blah, blah, blah. Do you help us determine the best location for the town and then determine what the solar panel array would look best for what project? I don't even know.
Well, maybe,
So I could fully design the RFP, probably with no input, but obviously I want to know, like, what if there is an articulated goal of what you want to see from this process. I can help, integrate that into the recommendations that I'd make. I can guide you folks as to what kinds of projects are typically successful
Mhm.
in terms of getting built and producing the kind of expected financial outcome. Because I think at the end of the day, there's really two drivers here. I find typically it's financial and the sustainability side.
Mhm.
Typically, both. Yeah, for there to be motivation to do things.
Well, I
So
think there's another outlier there is is getting the rest of the town to buy into it. So,
what's the decision-making process? Because some towns that I've worked with require like a town, basically a town vote, right?
yeah,
delivery
For an investment, it would,
for an investment. Oh, or, okay, and then that gets,
or an allocation.
okay, and that gets to another just general point about how these things work. So generally speaking, there's two ways that these projects get financed. There's either, and there's sort of other layers of this onion that you can, for that, but town can own it or the vendor can own it. Pros and cons to each. The model I see most municipalities take is the vendor owned approach, where
They're not responsible for maintaining it and everything.
it's more of a hands-off operation where, let's say you put solar on the roof of the school. Basically what ends up happening is that the vendor is sort of like a mini utility on your roof. They're selling you power at a, one of the key differences is that it would be generally a fixed price for 20 years. That's, a little different than the utility model where the prices can kind of go up and down a bit, but the idea is the same. You're buying power from a generator.
We buy it directly from that, off of it itself.
Yeah, it basically, it backfeeds the building, it registers on your Eversource bill as you're lowering your Eversource bill, so that's a good thing. And then those kilowatt hours that you still need, you're buying from solar, but at lower costs. So you're saving money that way. And then there's no investment requirement for maintenance, et cetera. So anything normally associated with owning a system on the vendor.
I have well, look, I just didn't mean to interrupt you, Adam, but my question is what you meant by sustainability. So if I'm getting in there a little too early, put it off until you finished what you were saying.
Think, just the other thing, just to wrap up that point about ownership, the town wants to own it. There's certainly ways that municipalities can do that. It just, again, kind of go through the pros and cons of each approach, and some towns are kind of right off the gate or right on the bat, or right off the bat, say, look, we're not looking to make investments in this equipment. We just want to capture as much of the savings as we can. The maintenance obligations, the initial costs, we're happy to put on somebody else's plate. Or, if there's situations where, okay, this is like an investment that the town might want to make, always do it that way. But so the victor goes to spoils, I think, in some regard with this stuff, because if you own it, then all of the financial benefits flow back to the town.
What are the financial benefits of owning it other than beyond just saving, generating electricity? Okay, that would be lowering your outside energy costs. What would be other?
Yeah, so lowering your energy costs, number one. Number two, and this is something that's a little bit different now than it was a couple of years ago, where through the Inflation Reduction Act, the investment tax credit is now available to nonprofit entities, so municipalities. So generally that's about 30% of the project cost comes back within a year. And that, that's something that is, I think it's turned the thought process around a little bit for some municipalities. It's still, depending on the size of the project, it could still be, significant investment, even with that 30%. So I always tell folks, I'm agnostic as to which one it ultimately is. I can walk you through both, whether ownership or owned by a third party.
I think one of the things that we've only met a handful of times. So I think one of the things that we've identified is that none of us really know anything about it. And, it's a huge handicap for us trying to think about this. I really like the idea of putting them on the school. I think there has been some pushback about that because of one of the things is who does the structural assessment of the building, and how do we know that it's something we have to sell? Building committee and
We don't have anybody from Board of Ed here, do we?
No, nobody from the Board of
Emily.
Emily, yeah, right.
She's actually at.
Oh,
the
She's
board-
at the Board of Ed meeting now.
No, she's on the Zoom.
Okay, so, but I mean, it's that type of thing that there's just a whole lot to it. I mean, one of the areas that we've identified, our initial identification, there's no three-phase power, whether that limits the size of it. Or the, you know, the scope or the capacity of the actual array. And then there are some other town-owned pieces of property, that might require a lot more prep,
Mhm.
to get it right.
Yeah, and these are all 100% questions that, you know, are smart. They're, you know, you guys are thinking about it the right way. There are answers to these questions, and I think it's, you know, we kind of go through the process. These are things that I would kind of help guide you through, like as a for instance, if you were to put solar on any roof, whether it's a town hall, school, etc., whichever vendor you select would have to hire an independent, you know, third-party structural engineer at their cost to evaluate to make sure that the roof, you know, could support the weight, you know, for your snowstorm. So that's all, that's part of it. That's, you know, kind of a tried and true thing.
Well, what happens if,
It isn't.
but yeah, what happens if they go up there and they say, well, this roof's not good, you
Sure.
know, so they eat that cost and a little.
Yeah, that's on them. That's basically, and cost to do that generally for a small school is about $3,000. So, and if you have
To
structural.
do the study,
Yeah.
to get it structurally fit.
Well,
I-
that, yeah, right,
Well,
it's,
yeah. And here's the thing, if they come back and say, hey, the school can't take it, it's, you know. We tried, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
yeah.
you know, because generally speaking,
Unless
unless
the
it's like
timing
really
is,
close.
the timing is really good and the school is about to redo their roof. And they say, how much would it cost to make it structurally sound for this? And the timing is good, you know.
Well,
depends.
Yeah, I mean, there are smart ways to go about doing it where you can do some of that work in that advantageous time.
Right.
Generally speaking, what I've seen is, you know, and every school is different, right? Like some are, you know, some are built in the 50s, almost like to withstand a nuclear blast, right? And then you have buildings that, you know, were built in the 90s and above that sometimes it's like, they weren't really, you can tell they weren't thinking about these things. And then you have brand new schools now, which are like, they're solar ready. So you see the whole gamut of things. And then you have schools which, you know, part of it was built in the 50s, part was built in the 80s and, you know, the 80s, 90s and today, right? So it's, you don't really know until you start looking at, you know, again, if you have structural drawings in-house already, that's great. That gives you a big leg up. If you have nothing, because sometimes that just happens, you know, maybe somebody have structural drawings sometime, but it was pretty, this was 40 years ago. Then, you know, you get a structural engineer to basically start from scratch and give you your answers that way.
But these are the type of issues
Like
that you will
procedural.
help us to guide.
Yeah,
through
these are
this,
just
huh?
procedural questions, right, about how you do this and the order in which things get done and whose responsibility it should be and all that stuff.
So
Before we begin step one, is there a contract involved with Titan? And if the project doesn't go beyond any of these steps, what would our obligations be?
Sure. So there's a 2-page consulting contract that we have that basically just spells out exactly what we're gonna do. The time frame that we're gonna do it in, how we're compensated. And within that contract, it makes it very clear that there's no circumstance under which the town would have to come out of pocket to fix anything. We basically will get you through to step 3, which is we've run the RFP, we have the results. You know, we've walked you through, we've educated you, you feel confident, and like that moment we're like, okay, choice is yours. Are you going to move forward with a vendor? Or, you know, say, no, it's not for us, and then, you know, find out after. We are then, if you contract with a vendor, then that vendor will from step 3 through step 5 be responsible for paying this. So the contract, yeah, and that's all spelled out in the agreement. So, and the important thing to emphasize is that there's no situation in which Titan CCM comes back to the town and says, hey, you know, you didn't do this, but pay up. That's, I mean, that, and again, we structured it very purposely that way because it can be really challenging for municipalities to get these projects moving, get traction, and making financial commitments directly before you even know what you want to do is kind of a big ask for each municipality. So that's
So
why it's
Adam,
structured
if I-
that way.
And I apologize if my voice is too loud. Sometimes it comes across very loud and I'm sorry if it is. So,
Oh, okay.
but, okay, So you had said quite a few paragraphs back that sustainability was the other issue besides, financial viability. And I'm just not at all sure that we understand what that means. So if you could clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, most municipalities, they'll have, if not a formalized plan of conservation and implementing renewables, they'll at least have an interest in trying to, move in that direction, right? So sustainability can mean different things to different people. I mean, it's, how much can you reduce your consumption? It's always a good question.
But it's always in the context of environmental ethics, basically, of the town, the value.
Yeah, it's about
Money.
well, when people try to quantify it, it's usually greenhouse gas emissions. Like what from the renewable side, how much renewable energy are you putting into the power mix to then subtract out greenhouse gas emissions? And there's different benchmarks that you can use. And then you could get into all these different ways of how you characterize, one emission over the next. But generally, the thing that most municipalities are concerned with is how do we lower our energy consumption and how do we displace the conventional energy that we draw from Eversource with a form of renewables. That's basically
Okay.
what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you very much. And you're probably
Sure.
familiar with the fact that we have a hydroelectric plant in Falls Village. And that should help us to all rather be proud of our sustainability at this point. I ran some numbers. This is just for background. I just ran some numbers. And Falls Village produces, I believe, twice as much electricity as Falls Village consumes as a town. Just a nice thing to know, and everybody should feel good about it. Doesn't change any of the things that this committee is going to try to do. But another issue that I have is smart meters. Are you at all familiar with how they are either used today or will be used in Connecticut? And have you any experience with smart meters?
Smart metering is sort of one of those, sort of like a generalized term, again, that can kind of mean different things to different people.
I mean,
in
the ones that
terms-
can be programmed so that you can pay less during the low usage hours, which encourages people to run certain, appliances, charge their cars between midnight and 6 a.m. That aspect. But I believe that is it Pura has a specific proposal before it to use smart metering, and it hasn't quite received the blessings of our utilities yet. Perhaps you know more than I.
From what I know about smart metering, some of this comes down to like the divide between residential and then the commercial industrial, and I put municipalities in the commercial industrial bucket here. Because this is something that most people, I mean, when you get your Eversource bill, you're not like scrutinizing line by line, probably. Yeah, well, I mean, so what's interesting about residential versus commercial, like the main distinction is that residential meters don't give any preference to time of use, whereas most commercial industrial meters are time of use, where you have peak and off peak. Off peak's cheaper, on peak's more expensive. For instance, it's just like everybody needs power at the same time, congestion increases the price. So if you're running a school, short of getting kids to go to school at 3 a.m, you don't really have a lot of options. You kind of need to run the school when you need to run it. But for residential, in theory, and other utility markets have this for residential, but Connecticut's been kind of slow to adopt it, where you would basically benefit from shifting your consumption to off-peak times versus on-peak. So right now in Connecticut, you could get home at 5 o'clock, put your dishwasher on, run your washing machine, put the air conditioning on, blow dry your hair, and whatever, any fire up every electric device in the house, and Eversource wouldn't recognize that as being any different 5 p.m. than at 3 a.m. So the idea, that if people had more control over the pricing, that would influence behavior. But for something like this, kind of like what we're talking about today in terms of renewables and things like that, I mean, the only thing that's sort of unique about the metering is that if you have solar location, you then have two-way metering where you're sending energy back at certain times. If the facility can't use it at the moment, it's back to the grid, and then you get credited future bills for it through a mechanism called net metering. But that's really the extent of anything that's sort of new and different on the metering side, commercial, industrial, and for projects like this. I don't know if that answer helps.
Well, it does.
Um,
So Adam,
that's
so
what
then
I-
the second part of that is whether or not it is good at this time to consider solar to battery storage so that the battery storage can support whatever the facility is, a school, a firehouse, whatever, during low peak time. In other words, less expensive to the town, but also better for sustainability, better for the need for new plants of any kind.
Yeah, and batteries are an interesting topic. We've been involved with battery storage projects over the last 18 months because Connecticut does have energy storage solutions program. Interestingly, it's about to cap in June, mid-June of this year. It's been in place for about 2 years, and it's kind of winding through its initial cycle. I have had very little luck getting battery projects to pencil out for municipal properties.
Because.
Size and cost. It's just not the sort of scale that you typically. So the incentives are okay, but they're not fantastic in Connecticut. Like they're not like, oh yeah, this is great. It's going to subsidize the heck out of the thing. Like I've been successful with one municipal project so far. It was a wastewater plant. Their demand, controlling that demand cost for them was, a pretty financial mover. It's a big plant, probably like twice the size of their high school in terms of energy consumption. So I'm always a little bit hesitant to throw out battery storage as an option that's really like knock out of the park quite yet for people. That's not to say that something couldn't change in the future. I know that there's a substation in Falls Village, right? And I'm starting to see more interest from the broader developer community in trying to place battery storage adjacent to substations, kind of help address that, but like on a bigger scale, not just like on a building by building basis. So that might be something if everyone's property. Right there. Yeah.
With Ray's town hall.
Yeah, what do you need to tell? Everything's virtual now.
Well,
So
Adam, so the idea of a battery substation is a huge step. We are at the baby step level right now. If we
yeah,
were
that's
to,
why I didn't even put batteries up yet, because it's
no, I
like,
know. So I'm not talking at all about a battery substation. I'm talking about the use of the best technology with whatever approach we take, whether it is the school or the firehouse, or perhaps a field which is totally shielded from public view. So it is not really, an eyesore. And if it were to go on a building like the firehouse or the school or some other building that might be identified, we would want to be able to perhaps do a demonstration of how an intelligent application includes battery backup storage and smart metering. And because we're very small and we're very new, it would be an interesting size for a demonstration.
I think those are items to be worked out, assuming we go into a contract, but I'd be interested in knowing if we're really interested in doing this with you, what would our next step be?
sure. So, if you guys said to me, hey, this sounds interesting, let's go for it. I mean, I would circulate that to pay for the holding agreement, of course, that sort of components, but from there, really articulating like, okay, I can tell you guys what sorts of projects are being successful within the incentive program. And I'll touch on the incentive program because I think it's worth, in the initial meeting, just kind of walking through the realities of the program and how you navigate it. Because I think that might elicit, if I give you some of the criteria of like, okay, what generally is successful, that might spur ideas to life in terms of like, okay, yeah, look here, look there. And then when I know what locations those are, I can do an evaluation, just basically first steps like on a desktop, just to say, okay, I have utility bills in one hand, Google Earth GIS in the other. What's this telling me about, feasibility, project size, some reasonable expectation of what the financial outcome could look like from the RFP. And I think collectively deciding what sites, do you want to include in this year. Yeah, first round or second round or whatever. And
Would we
Yeah.
work with you, or do you have a team and you assign us somebody to us?
so you've been working with me primarily. I have a team of people behind me that I kind of delegate work to.
Okay.
But I would,
The lead.
yeah, but I would be the one that, if we're sitting around this table again, it would be.
So your incentive is where I wanted to go with the question, we've been holding it for a little bit here, but so originally. I'm not sure if you can discuss with Peter, maybe you know that we looked at purchasing in a Ray with an Eversource grant. Do you remember at all? That was coming from the angle of the town purchasing it. Chris misspent all our money, so we don't have any money left.
So what a nice truck out
Wow,
there.
that was-
So let's
We're lucky there.
if we go to a vendor owned system. My initial question, and maybe your incentive will answer, but I'd rather ask it up front in case we can steer it that way. So say we had this one project that we were looking at and sized already and whatnot, and just probably won't move forward on it. That's not under this committee, but say that it's vendor owned instead. Does it get to a point where I think a goal that we spoke early on in this committee is to supply our municipal, at the minimum, try to equal our municipal usage. So we get at least a net zero, we're using what we're producing out of solar. That was kind of an initial discussion we had, which I think is important for you to know that. But then, what we looked at as a benefit is if we owned our own system, we got the whole kit and caboodle and we could get the financial asset of the overproduction or the offset, right? There's no vendor.
Where we could apply the credits to anybody.
So,
Yeah,
so if we skip the buying and we have vendors that own them, it's on our municipal properties. Can we, at what point does where do we get to zero? So there's incentives for us to be locked in on our price for, say, this one project. What if we have 3 sites? Is there an additional benefit to the town, so if we have more production than what we use?
Net
Is
metering.
there a net? Will that come off our cost of, have you seen that come off the cost of electricity?
Yeah, I can give you an example as potentially at the town pool. Where we have a pump that runs but the pool's only open 2.5 months a year. So if we set up something to cover that. November, December, January, February, and all these other months where the pool's not open. What would happen to that? Would it just continue to generate credit? I think it would outperform the usage that we would
But I think-
benefit from
Yeah,
that one particular meter.
Doesn't the asset go to any town electric bill, no matter what we?
Yeah,
yeah.
I think only to,
Oh, so-
because the vendor has to make money.
So there's a few different,
Because they're.
ideas kind of rolled up into this conversation. So if I like just sort of picking apart a little bit, maybe I think it might be helpful to explain, like there's 2 ways you can build a project. You can do behind the meter, so basically you have an array that's tied directly to a load, like if it's on a roof or
that it's fueling this thing.
Yes.
The tool, it's fueling the pump.
And with that, there's something called net metering, which would align with, let's say you had a pump, right, that only operated a couple months out of the year, and maybe it wasn't even in sync with solar's production. What happens there is through net metering, which is basically the utility, like I talked about that two-way meter before, coming and going. If you were generating during times when you couldn't use that power, what you do then is size the solar array and the production thereof to account for how much does that particular meter consume in a 12-month period. So that way, let's say, even if your production and your consumption are out of alignment, over the course of a year, you'd still get the credit for all of that production and
When you need it.
when you need it. Basically, it banks.
That would be, I think, for that particular site would be appealing because it wouldn't be much, right? It would be a
Yeah.
pretty small setup. I think, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, and here's the other side of the coin too. So you can also build a project that's what's known as front of the meter, which doesn't need to be tied to a load necessarily. With those projects, though, you really need to be at a certain size in order for it to make financial sense. Like, and even behind the meter to some extent, I'm almost like, I'm not doing you guys any favors if I don't say that sometimes projects can be small enough where we have a hard time vendor interest in them, right? It's just a fact of the matter. I mean, the residential market is sort of its own thing, and then on the commercial side, because I know, residential size, 5-10 kW, rooftop, like there's a whole industry devoted to that. There's a kind of profit structure devoted to that. The incentives are devoted to that, and that's very much like over here. But on the commercial side of things, we really need to be thinking, in order to draw on the kind of vendor interest that I think is going to provide the financial value back to the town, that'll be interesting. It probably needs to be in more like the 50 kW or so. And we'll go through this all, and I'll tell you straight away, like, hey, I don't think there's enough meat on the bones here for a vendor to be interested. We can always put the RFP out and see what comes back in. I just want to make sure I'm bringing my experience in this conversation so you guys are focusing your efforts on the things that can the most.
Can you just explain front of meter again?
Yeah, sure. I know I'm kind of like veering and zigzagging a little bit.
That's okay.
So with front of the meter, and this is how actually another approach that I've used with other municipalities that in some ways are probably similar Falls Village, where front of the meter, okay,
Is front of the meter just selling power into the grid, or
Correct.
just pushing power into the grid, you get a credit for it.
well,
There's no load, you're not drawing the load off of that at all.
We don't even get the credit, we get to purchase at a set price.
so front of the meter, there's different ways that you can do it. The way it typically gets done is, let's use a very simple example here. Let's say the town has a piece of property somewhere, and it fits all the criteria that feasibility. Because you can't just put these things anywhere; they have to go in certain places. Proximity to the three-phase being a big part of it. I think one or both you mentioned. So let's say, okay, you want to take that parcel, do a front of the meter project. What does that mean? Solar developer will come in, build, own, create the array, and basically just write the town a check, or you can tether it to either like a flat per acre dollar amount, the size of area they lease. They could, give you, I mean, there's different financial arrangements, but that's basically like the premise behind it. It doesn't have to be tied to a load. It could be 20 times the size of the town's energy use. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to be within certain size environment of the program. And that's a really kind of neat and clean way to do it, where you're probably way outperforming your sustainability goals. If you add a couple megawatts to the grid, right? I mean, it's going to be many multiples greater than your energy use. And bigger projects are bigger dollars too. So that's just another thing to think about. The kind of middle way here, do a front of the meter project, and have utility bill credits go to your accounts would be, let's say you added up all your municipal energy consumption and you kind of had that number, right? I don't know what it is, let's just call it 3 kilowatt hours. And if the town had a piece of property somewhere where you could put an array that would create said, million kilowatt hours, you can do something called virtual net metering, which basically means the energy that's created by this array then go back into the grid. Then that energy could be converted into a dollar credit that could be distributed across your utilities. So there's different ways to do it. It depends on,
That's how we were looking at it.
yeah, because sometimes people, and there's pros and cons, right? Like the pro to that is, okay, you can directly reduce your Eversource charges. That's a good thing. The con, for some municipalities, is that you don't really have a lot of energy consumption. You don't have like tons and tons. So if you want to drive like the maximum financial outcome, you may not even want to be confined just to your consumption. So again, there's a whole slew of different ways, and it's part of this is all more than anybody can digest in one sitting.
I know, our questions are gonna be endless. I just want to build on something you just said. On that front of meter with various forms it could take financially as far as your exchange. Is that only, is that a structure that can be used for when you build and maintain your own, or only when
Yeah, same one.
so it can also be used when you hire a vendor to build and they, okay, so either way, you could use this front of meter structure.
Exactly. It's
I just need.
So the town could still financially benefit if it
If there-
outproduces, or it is in discussion, if it outproduces what it consumes.
Whether
There
it
can
owns
be a
the,
financial benefit to the town on top of buying it at 15 cents per kilowatt hour. I just don't.
whether it
Yeah.
owns the solar arrays
Whether it
or
owns-
whether a vendor does.
Correct.
That's
Thank you.
yeah, the programs, Cura and Eversource and the state, they don't really care at the end of the day who owns it. These structures are there to be utilized. It's just, okay, who's gonna sit
The
there?
vendorship's here because they need to make a certain amount and make their money back.
Yeah, I mean, a vendor,
Either by selling it to you or owning it and producing and.
They
having
get
it
tax
run.
credits too.
yeah, I mean, a vendor, whether a vendor builds it for you or builds it for themselves, I mean, they'll make money either way,
Yeah.
just nature of things.
Okay.
They'll probably make, more relative if they own it, because then they also are taking on the risk. So it's just adequate for that risk. But
Yeah, kilowatts, I don't look at my utility bill, I don't analyze what the cost of anything is, but 25 grand of electricity in a year. Is that a lot? What does that equate to? 1 megawatt or any idea?
well, I can tell you,
Just give me
My mental math
is
here.
that a large amount?
No.
Is that a
well,
small?
no, it's not, and it's, but it's I don't know if that's even the right question, because it's like, well, it's yours, it's just, it is what the town uses,
Well,
so.
it's not what the town uses it, but it is what the school uses, because that's in their budget, okay? 25 grand.
Is that oil and propane?
No, that's electricity.
Thank
Just
you.
electricity.
We'll spend more than that per month at the quarry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just for relative.
Per
Perspective.
month, electricity?
I can give you guys an example of another situation. So, town of Scotland is, opposite end of the state. But I think some of this just sort of has like a similar look and feel. So basically what we did there was we put solar on the elementary school and the town hall roof. Just, the roofs were new, oriented directly to the sun. It was just, that made sense. They wanted to directly offset that consumption. And then, but they wanted to go bigger than that, or kind of, utilize more of, the town resources. So one thing led to another, where we evaluated town-owned piece of property. It was about 30 acres. And unfortunately, it was pretty wet. But that led to a situation where we ended up developing a project nearby on a private land for a private landowner. But the town benefited from that, and the town facilitated the introduction to this person because the town ended up getting a pretty to their tax base for the project.
Mm.
So it's about $60,000 a year or so in tax revenue for the town. So it was sort of a roundabout way of accomplishing something similar. So again, just
Being
when
creative.
these are situations where like, okay, sometimes, the path here to success is, it could kind of zigzag a little bit. But this is just different experiences I've had personally working with towns that are probably similar in terms of, real estate, population, rooftop energy uses, all these things that you can
And
think
we're
of.
really jumping you all over the map today. Thank you for that.
That's okay.
Do you have any experience with putting arrays on landfills?
Yes, so within the Eversource program, landfills get an incentive enhancement. So we've done the last count was 12 throughout the state. I mean, I don't want to say they're no brainers because you always got to, it's a sensitive piece of property, so you got to, do it correctly. And
We don't think it's no brainer.
yeah, I mean,
No, I
deep
should
is
say that.
deep is involved.
A
Deep,
few of us.
the thing with, it's from a financial standpoint, taking something that's almost completely useless and turning it into something valuable, it's a good thing. The permitting process is just a little bit more extensive. You have to work with deed, basically.
How big of a, what experience have you had in a capped landfill, the size, what size have you worked with? You have,
Yeah, so the smallest capped landfill that we've worked with, I believe was about 8 acres. The biggest was
the total capped landfill and usable portion.
Yeah. And that's not to say that it couldn't go smaller than that, it's just,
Impressed that you could even recall that. That's pretty cool.
I've been,
I've been doing this for a while, yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is when we kind of live and breathe municipal solar. Yeah, I mean, that's, and the major hurdle, obviously, honestly, that I see with capped landfills, a lot of times they're like mounds.
Yeah.
Big mounds.
Yeah.
You can't penetrate the ground. So unless they're flat-ish, slope has to be like less than 10 degrees, otherwise.
There's some doctor into it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we looked at the landfill not that long ago it was almost like a pyramid, like a bird-shaped pyramid, and something you can do with
Is
it.
it just what, unstable?
No, because you can't penetrate ground, so you have to weigh it down with ballast blocks.
Okay,
And if the slope is too steep, it'll never be secure enough
I see.
to get permitted.
Because it seems like it's a great way to angle it towards the sun when it's sloped. huh?
Well, if it was sloped at a 10 degrees, that would be great, but anything greater than that, and you have to basically use like driven steel beams, and you just can't do that with so there's considerations there too, but
Okay. But back to my question of 25 grand, I mean, that's a pretty small amount of spending.
yeah, but for a small school, we do small school, elementary school rooftop jobs all the time. So that's not for a behind the meter rooftop project, elementary school, that's pretty common.
Okay.
It's where we'd probably start to run into a little bit of friction in the marketplace is if like we started bringing residential sized projects into like a commercial RFP, unless they were sort of dovetailing on other projects like an elementary school or maybe something else where a vendor would just sort of like look at it as one big thing.
Well, I was gonna ask you that, if we
several.
set up the school and maybe the emergency services center is a pretty good sized building.
Yeah.
Not huge, but, and then maybe
Several.
on the coattails, that little one up at the pool.
That's how it would go. Yeah, I mean, that's
One project with.
like the eight split. That's kind of.
And is that typical that it would be one RFP for like 3 or 4 different sites?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that if you have different decision-making bodies involved, which could be the case for a and the major delineation I'm thinking of is Board of Ed in town. Some towns I work with, the municipality, the town proper and Board of Ed, you know, they're basically like drinking buddies, they'll do whatever with each other, and then there's others where like they don't even talk to each other, so.
You know, Pat?
Yeah, so you got, yeah, I mean, you guys know your town better than me, so we would just want to structure it accordingly where. You weren't, you know, the fate of your project wasn't necessarily contingent on the fate of the Board of Ed. But if you act as generally like a cohesive group, with some word close to it, then you know, there's different ways we can write it up in the RFP.
So they do get their money from the town.
Right, it's.
Yeah, I don't think I would wanna approach it that way, though, you know, I mean, I would wanna sell it to them, and it's a benefit.
Yeah, yes,
Sustainable and.
And,
You know, hey, look,
so here's the question of the school, right? The highest production of the year, school's out of session.
That's the net metering benefit that you get, so
And
summertime.
we definitely have to meter it accordingly,
Yeah,
because behind the meter wouldn't really benefit us, because on the darkest months could be the highest.
so behind the meter,
Like,
so,
didn't see that
yeah,
wrong?
Can benefit both ways, it's behind the meter,
Yeah.
you can just, you just build up the
The
credit.
credits are there, okay.
It's
Yeah.
net zero at the end.
it draws, so basically what happens is the utility. Because this is, I mean, the net metering is really here to help solve that problem in particular, because it's basically for every location almost, it's, you know, you get this certain production, this or not leaking. So what ends up happening is as long as you're sized appropriately, and by that I just mean you look at a 12-month alley, you know, your average and you're minus percent or so for some month. You just want to make sure that over time, if your school consumes 100,000 kilowatt hours, you probably want to be creating about 90 with your array. And then in the summertime, if you know your usage is here, your production's here, and things start to kind of go that way again, you just pull in those credits that you've generated from overproduction, and it helps like apply that just out into the future as opposed to being used like in real time.
This may be out of your realm, it's tracking that credit and whatnot for the money manager of the town. Is
Well,
that,
that's part of the tracking the savings and the follow through like the M&V to make sure that, you know, your finance folks know like what their bills are going to look like.
Yeah, and is it doing what we wanted it to do?
because I've, through my professional work, I've bought credits from a vendor from a farm,
Right.
because I like the whole concept of it, but the tracking of it is.
My guess is you probably, did you do something under the older virtual net metering program? So they've changed something, which I think you
And it's
probably.
Massachusetts, and it's.
Yeah. Okay, and Massachusetts, yeah. So one of the things that they've changed, because they had something similar in Connecticut, but the program now is actually, you get a fixed value. Because I think in the Massachusetts program and the old Connecticut program, that value, the credit value you get, go like up and down and down. And like being able to track that is a real, you know, nuisance. So
But then, so in my next question, and I think I'll stop with this one, is my experience on that too is, so I bought the power from the third party, the farm. But I still had the delivery charge through the power company. Would that be the same type of deal here? Eversource still gets their delivery charge? And the net metering is separate from that, so there'll always be that delivery charge that is not, none of this production offsets.
yeah, so there's some nuance to this. So if we're talking about behind the meter, let's like let me address it from two directions. So the behind the meter is, and I'll caveat all this by saying that, you know, the utility has been good about carving out charges on the bills that are hard to touch.
Mhm.
You know, for reasons that make
Yeah.
sense, right? I mean, yeah, we get it. So if you have a behind the meter system, you just want to make sure, this is again something I'd help you with, to identify all the charges on your Eversource bill that are guaranteed to get addressed. If you subtract a kilowatt hour out from solar, you're going to subtract X value at the other side.
Mhm.
And then there's others, demand charges, which are really hard to touch. So basically what I do is I back those out. And then if you grab some of that savings over time, like your peak production just happens, or, you know, your peak at your facility for that month just happens to occur when solar's thing, then that's great, you get some credit. But it's not really wise to like bank on that. So that's behind the meter situation. If you had a front of the meter situation where you're getting utility bill credits, like dollar credits on your bill from an array that might be located down the street. The way that works is, and this will be a whole nother conversation about how the utility incentive programs work, but let's say you're successful, you get an array bill and it's going to start producing credits that are going to go to your bill. That credit value is going to be a fixed value, certain cents per kilowatt hour. And if the array produces X kilowatt hours, you just multiply by that number, and that's the dollar amount that lands on your bill. Might not directly correspond to what your actual charges are. There's different reasons for that, but I would encourage you to think of more that as more of like a financial transaction than a subtraction of kilowatt hours. And again, this is the kind of thing where once we start to figure out like what directions we want to go, I can make sure that we have in-depth conversations like what are all these nuances and how do they apply to the particular project you're thinking about. So this is a lot.
So behind the meter, the term you're using is distribution charges or so? So behind the meter, there's no distribution charges. We'd have to subtract that out.
No, delivery charge. You have delivery.
Yeah, so the utility,
Let me finish. In front of the meter, though, there would be those delivery charges because they are delivering electricity.
so there's still
That's a nuance, I think, as well, because you
Right.
still get distribution, even though you're generating it. It's still going out and coming back
It's
in.
back in, so you have to
Because
pay
you're
that full
using X
distribution.
number of kilowatts, and I could be wrong on this, but this is my understanding, we use that X number of kilowatts.
Yeah.
And even though you're offsetting it by production.
Yeah.
It's not like it never.
It went out.
And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think they still charge for the kilowatt usage. Demand or delivery charge, right?
yeah, so the basic,
And that may change, I don't know.
and there's like even a whole nother layer down of the switch is
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna actually suggest something.
all right, yeah,
Intricate.
yeah.
Forward with you, and we get to that point. I'm gonna need an example of a bill.
Of course, and that's generally what we do.
Because that's how I understand.
Yeah, I think
it.
we're
Like, I'm like,
getting pretty involved here.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I just will really need it in black and white to compare it, so I can really understand it. It's great that
So that's
you
what I
are
typically do.
attempting to
Yeah, I
just-
know.
Just do it verbally, but it's, there's a lot of,
Well, it's not to digest.
So here's what I would do. Yeah.
people really are getting it beyond me. It's
No,
okay.
but I think the first step is to decide, are we going with
Yes.
Titan?
Right,
Not.
right.
And then with the guidance of whoever we go with, then we can explore different
So
options.
our little rabbit holes, I think are benefit though, because we're putting them on the spot and you're doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are good questions and it's a good format. And I guess the only thing I'll say is that generally what I do is I'll take a utility bill and I'm sure you guys have done, you see it
Yep.
on page 2, it's like
Mhm.
10 line items and they all.
Don't-
So generally what I do is I just have an Excel sheet that I've created where I take sample bill, write down all those charges, show you which ones are addressable, which ones are probably not addressable, and which ones are definitely not addressable. And what, kind of like a future state bill would look like. So you can see like what charges are actually going to be affected. What does that mean?
Do we
Education.
municipal, is our municipal bill one bill?
No,
No.
no, broken out to
Different accounts.
There's
Different
different meters,
different
yeah.
bills, different meters.
So, I'm wondering if we think we have enough information where we can let Adam go and have a conversation
Correct.
tonight and make a decision.
Is there anything more in here that you would like to cover before?
Yeah, thanks.
The rest of this is basically just to articulate what would be in the agreement of the scope of work that we would do.
That was pretty.
Yeah, so that's in here. And then,
These maps here, and you keep their Salisbury in there, but I never see it in any of the lists of towns. I don't know what it really means.
yeah, so these are projects.
Goshen, but there's no, like, what is this list compared to this?
Yeah, so this is just a sampling of towns where we've done work.
And what is the second, the numbers is
Oh, so that should be included. Those are just the project sizes, kilowatts.
kilowatt hour.
Yeah, just examples. And then, because Peter is just curious,
What does the green Salisbury mean? in relation to this list?
Yeah, so these are the towns that have used the CCM program for renewable energy in some capacity.
Okay.
And then this is the list of projects that, the marketing team put together a list just to show, like, on a town by town. Yes,
And these are in kilowatt,
yeah.
okay, right?
Mhm.
And then you look at, let's say, Killingly, or you mentioned Scotland. Scotland has 2 entries, Killingly has 8 or 10, okay, is that like per
Per project,
system?
yeah.
Per system?
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea, just roughly, how big an array would be for 1,000 kilowatts?
Yeah, so that'd be about 5.5 acres.
That's a megawatt?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 5.5.
Yeah. And then Peter had asked for just some of the recent municipal RFPs that we have.
1,000 kilowatt.
1,000.
You're doing a meg, aren't you?
Yeah, 1 megawatt equals 1,000 kilowatt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Kilo.
Okay.
Some,
Some of these are pretty
Oh,
sizable.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
Adam, just, I'm sorry, it's me on the Zoom. You had mentioned on one of these lists that here on, I think it's page 3, the project experience, and on there it says Falls Village. I'm just curious. Let me just work it back up. No, it's page 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's,
Two,
yeah,
three,
I mean,
four,
we should
five.
talk
Sorry.
about this one, it says Falls Village. This page here,
23, municipal are.
the next page,
That's further.
yeah, that one, it mentions Falls Village.
It's a projection.
we worked already together, haven't we? No, I'm just kidding.
Projection.
Yeah, I don't think it's way on here. I think, because
And it's
I,
spelled wrong.
Yeah. Oh, after the
Oh.
apostrophe.
well, I didn't, then I most certainly did too. Maybe the marketing teams other were already working together.
So, because it's not in the green,
Is it possible that it was a town of Canaan, North Canaan?
because they're not in green either though, so I don't know where.
Well, I have a project tracker of like who we're like working with and then like conversations with. My guess is maybe your marketing team jumped the gun and.
Unless they had Falls River.
That's nice.
Well, I'll leave it up to you guys as to whether that name stays on the list or not.
No, actually, why don't you ask, because it doesn't carry the green at all here.
Yeah,
Goshen,
Yeah, Goshen,
do you recognize their project, Goshen?
um,
Right here.
yeah, so they did one of their schools.
Okay.
They only have one.
Yeah.
They're very small.
Yeah, they're elementary school, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
They're smaller than us, right?
No.
No,
Are they?
they're about the
No.
same size.
No.
Can you refer to an installation in acres? Typically, how many panels per acre is it say?
Kilowatts.
Panels per acre,
But
panels
five
per
of
kilowatt.
those are kilowatt.
I mean megawatts.
for how many panels in a megawatt size project? Is that what you're
You
asking?
said they were about
5.5
5
acres.
acres.
Right, in terms of,
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, can you get down to panel size?
yeah,
462 solar panels.
400, yeah.
And what would be the area required for 400?
For what size system? Is that something that you guys have looked at?
This was the purchasing deal that we had at one.
We didn't have a deal.
No, we didn't have.
We were considering.
Almost 70.
I'm like,
The other one.
yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to try to, if you have like a map, I could probably see like.
But the panels are not necessarily standard size.
Yeah.
Does it,
Yeah, I
does it
mean-
depend on which vendor you go with?
They're generally about the same size. I mean, they're usually like, this table here to here.
And they generate 180 watts or so?
Well, it depends. It could be anywhere from, 385 to 540,
Okay.
depending on how many watts it is. If it's a project, how many did you say? 750 panels?
462.
462? That sounds probably like 2.5 acres, 3 acres.
Yeah, what was that site that? 1 acre.
1 acre?
Is this the one that for the town firm? I think so.
Probably.
Yes.
That's the only one we had.
It was an
approval for.
acre. Is what they proposed,
Yeah.
1 acre.
I mean, it depends how they're spaced out too.
Mhm.
Again, relatives, there is in West Giants.
To estimate that.
Kind of, I mean, yeah, kind of tough. I mean, you could have sort of, you know, condensed over a bigger or smaller area. I mean, that's just sort of what my gut was telling me, like two neighbors or so, but sounds like they're already.
Okay, Adam, I have another question, and that is, on your map of Connecticut towns where you have project experience, you have Salisbury, and do you have any knowledge about what the Salisbury project was?
I don't know offhand. I can ask though. It might have been one of my colleagues that led that one.
It would help us because all of our towns are grappling with this.
Let's
And,
talk to this a little bit.
You know, we do collaborate, and what one of us learns, the others can benefit from. So I think it would be helpful if we knew.
Yeah,
I do know Salisbury. Okay, because I spoke with, what's his name?
Curtis, right?
Curtis, town manager. And it is an array that is going on town-owned property contiguous to the elementary school. It was originally going to go on the roof of the elementary school, but they moved it to town property contiguous to it. So it's a elementary school project.
My question would be more, perhaps, I don't know if this is yours, Daley, is if we knew that your firm had actually done projects in Salisbury and in with them and Goshen, then it would be easy to say, hey, what was your experience like with Titan? And
Yeah.
then reference check.
Yeah.
It's not really specific to their project because every towns will be different. It's really, what was their experience with?
I spoke with Killingly, and I spoke, and also that town manager was also the manager at Putnam. Okay.
And they told you about
They
Titan.
told us about that.
Yeah, I think I gave you some references for projects to
That's great.
Billingsley and Putnam and.
Putnam.
Well, I'm agreeing with Amy. I think Amy's making a good point. The central school, the Salisbury Central School, obviously was considered, and they instead chose to go with a field. And I think that experience would be very helpful to our committee. So if you could, Adam, give us some contact that you are referring to in this proposal, I think that could be helpful.
I'll talk to my colleagues and see just, you know, who the right person would be to talk to.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think, does anybody else have any questions?
Well, Serge
think
had
we will
the
have-
question of
Melissa?
next steps. Did we
Yeah.
get that kind of clarified?
Hold on.
What would be the next step?
Yeah, hold on, let's,
I think I am so far in the weeds that I can't figure out what's going on here. But, we do have to figure out if we're going to hire this company. That's step one.
That's it.
But step one, after that, what is next? From statement of work, I'm trying to figure out if it says provide initial system design for our review. That's a step. But it says system design. Does that mean you help us figure out, because that's what I was trying to figure out, the actual location of this? Everybody keeps saying school. I know that everybody's trying to get their information, but does your company then, as a step, say, okay, this is a design that will help you at this location, at that location, at this location? So there's various locations. Or is the location of the design that you guys decide, do we have to decide where the best location is based on what's most feasible, what's gonna cost? It's so
I
many
think
things.
this is a really important question, because I gotta tell you, this is one of the parts, I'm just gonna say, this is one of the aspects that tears us apart a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's not that, we all agree that we'd like to save our town money, and we all, I believe, agree that our town wants to do its part for the
Mhm.
environment. But we can't understand what our options are and what the best options are. We don't want to zero in on one. We want to really understand, like, what are all our options are, what are the pros and cons? Before someone says zeroes in on one, that we've already, like, really uncomfortable about. We'd like to really have a conversation about all these options.
And would we need to provide you with a list of inventory of property that you then
Town
review?
properties.
Yes.
Okay, I think,
And that's what he covered. I mean,
Yeah.
we
I
give
was
him that
sure.
list and he'll do, the first step is he sits at his computer and he's gonna go Google Earth. He's
And
gonna
that's what
say-
I wasn't sure about, if your company would
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean,
get through the
can
weeds.
I, let's think about how we're gonna move forward here, and I think, one way that I can identify maybe the best path is for us to, digest what we've had here a little bit tonight.
Mhm.
And maybe formulate some more pointed questions, something more, more specific. Can we get you on a Zoom so you don't have to drive all the way out here again? Answer some of our questions there, and then I think we look forward to whether we want to go further with it.
I'm not sure. That question that Melissa asked is really important.
But you answered it.
Did you?
well, I thought I did, but let me.
I have
you know,
to be
There- I-
clear,
I think-
real clear.
Yeah, like unequivocally. So generally how this works is I defer first to you guys and your knowledge of the town to say, these are the sites that we want me to look at.
Okay,
In conjunction with that, I mean, I can certainly look as well. I mean, in terms of rooftops and
To
things
ask
like
questions.
that. Yeah. You guys just probably collectively will certainly know like far better for me and more efficiently anyway than me to say, look, these are the areas that we're considering. And from that, let's say you send me 10 sites, there will probably be like 3 that are really like, or like, let's dig in here and try to, figure out, are these the right fit? And for the other 7, I can tell you probably pretty quickly, reason 1, 2, 3, why it might not work, or it might be more work. So that's typically how I do it. I'm also happy to take my own look at town to try to figure out, okay, like if I were you guys, where would I be?
What haven't we considered?
Yeah, exactly.
So that
and
answers
is,
your
that
question.
answers my question, except that, is that before or after we're in contract with you
Well,
as a company?
yeah,
Work.
so
Oh, can I just say one more thing that
Is,
we have, before we talk with him anymore, our committee has to have a pretty pointed conversation about this
Right.
without him, and then we can, I think we bring him in, we answer a few questions. We're still probably 3 meetings away before he begins to look at some of the sites that we've identified.
Right, but
So-
the 2-page agreement happens before that.
right,
That's
that
kind of-
I understood, so,
I mean,
so-
that's it.
Yeah.
yeah, so
So
generally speaking,
at one point,
Step 1, 2, and 3 is that 2-page agreement, he said, right here.
at
1,
what
2.
point do you want to do the 2-page agreement? I mean, what I'm saying is,
I think
probably have a couple of more questions to ask. We need to regroup as a committee. And polish up some of the questions before we get into that agreement. I'm not ready to enter into any agreement yet.
I'll defer to you, Chris. My feeling is, I think you've given us a lot of information. I could be wrong. And I think our committee now has a lot of information that we could then say, this is what this is what we're hoping to achieve. Can your 2-page agreement be presented to us to consider? I don't think it's 2 or 3 meetings down the road. It's a two-page agreement with no financial obligation to get 1, 2, and 3. It's an education. We're getting a
Okay.
two-page agreement
See
to
where
get
you're-
an
I see
education.
where you're going with that.
There's no money.
Is that jive with
Okay.
you?
So here would be my personal
Just asking.
preferred way.
Okay.
That's what we need.
Yeah, so generally, like, I'm 100% happy to answer questions about what we do. Try to share as much information as I can to get you guys, off the ground and kind of moving towards something, whatever that ultimate goal is. I would prefer to have that consulting agreement ironed out before I start doing like real work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just because, I just need to figure out ways to allocate my time, right? So that's really my only preference is like once we get to a place where you're bringing sites to me for evaluation, like we've already kind of ironed out, the T's and C's of the agreement that we're working with.
What basically that two-page agreement is, I'm willing to educate you about what your options are for no money, but for your commitment to go through these first 3 steps. After those 3 steps, you can decide to like, okay, it's way too much for us, or we can keep on crawling forward. And then that's a different kind of obligation, that we have to consider, but there's no financial obligation. This is, hey, will you educate us, Adam?
Okay, so Amy, I just want to jump in for a second and say, I think you're raising good questions, but I don't think that this is the question to be put before Adam. I think that this is what the committee must consider.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, you guys formulate any other questions that you have for me in terms of like what we do and how we can help you. Happy to answer those for sure.
I think
And
that's what I'm thinking.
Oh,
yeah,
got
yeah, and
Whatever that looks like.
yeah, and then
mean-
whenever that is, just let me know and.
Yeah, we might not.
I
have
promise
thought-
they'll be elementary in,
Oh, no, it's okay.
No,
I don't promise that.
well.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, I'm gonna be doing a lot of work to get to here with you guys. Before there's any chance of a financial gain for me. So, I look at this as like, this is gonna be a thing that kind of clicks along through, a step-by-step process. You, as the town decision-making body, retain basically kind of all the cards, along the way. And I view it as it's my job to try to make this make sense for you and make it appealing. If we can't get there, we can't get there. But I think, most municipalities, when, there's projects like this that come around and we can put it together in a good way and everyone feels confident that they know what they're signing up for, then, you kind of join the ranks with the other, however many municipalities have done this already and a smooth process. So.
Great. If you could get back to us with which municipalities that you very specifically work with, so we can speak to them, it would be great.
Maybe a point person.
Yeah, if you want to go back.
yeah, right.
Sounds very
Yeah.
good.
With-
That would be good. That would be a good next step
Appreciate
for you. And then we'll get back to you then with some elementary or
I
not so
think-
elementary
Yeah,
questions.
just. Yeah.
Just in case we haven't thought of.
And,
something.
and I think we'll resort to Zoom so that, we
Unless
can
you
keep
like
it
to
short
come
and
out
sweet
here.
and may,
Sign drive, that bothers me. Yeah, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much,
Sure. I appreciate everybody's time and this is an extra copy and also
Emily.
my
Thank you
contact
for
information there, so.
clarifying.
Yeah, and
appreciate it.
again, I answer questions that's what I do, so don't hesitate to ask.
thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. Adam.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
So it's for Emily.
Right here.
Everybody.
Let's check on that one.
Thank you.
Does anybody,
Like,
Yeah, I want to.
Well, actually, I'll put them for the, can give us the.
For the roads,
I think you're really.
Thank you.
wrong on this
Does
point,
anybody
though,
else
that
need
He's
one?
not here to educate us, you're here to sell services, but the service.
the services are education
Yeah,
from the first 3 steps.
yeah, but he wants to get to step 3, more positively than just an educational process.
I didn't sense pressure.
And not like the other guy.
No, I really sense
Hmm.
that,
he's answering questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we can't get to step 4 unless we are really comfortable, and that takes education, educating.
Yeah, I
It doesn't-
understand. We
yeah.
do need lots of education, but we will only commit to deeply educate us if we are
sure.
moving
For sure.
forward with a
For sure.
project.
That's why he wants to, which makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah, I would want the same thing.
So one of the,
Well, I think, personally, I would like to see us collectively, identify some other sites.
Yeah.
I would actually like to go even, back up from there. And I'll wait till you leave here, okay? And then I'll ask the very pertinent, I think a very pertinent question, okay? Thanks, Adam.
Thank
you. Okay,
Drive safe.
we'll be in touch.
I think that's a good,
Yeah.
Thing to put on the list.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think the questions are good, but really, he said something here that, my ear perked up. He said, you guys as the decision makers.
Mhm.
Well, wait a second, are we the decision maker?
No.
Who is the decision maker? How does it get this board decided?
Well,
So this is
ultimately,
an
it'll be
advisory
town.
committee to the board.
Pardon me?
Right.
This is an advisory committee to the
Okay.
Board of Selectmen. The way that I would see it is if we come up with an idea and a plan, we present it to the Board of Selectmen through Chris, he's our chairperson. He'll present it to his fellow board members, at which point I think the prudent way would be they would send it to town meeting
Mhm.
with all the information.
Well,
One hearing and then town meeting.
well,
Not yet.
let me ask a question.
If
on
it
these.
can't- if it- it's all financial.
Yeah, if it doesn't involve money.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, to tell you the truth, I kind of think that's the way we're gonna go.
Me too.
right?
We have to go
Yeah,
that way.
okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
After
involve,
gut
it
feeling,
doesn't
I
involve
agree.
money, so the
Yeah.
Board of Finance really ain't in on the deal.
Correct.
Right,
And then furthermore, does it need to go to a town meeting if it ain't done in money?
Well, the only reason I say that, Peter, it does, I think the Board of Selectmen, and this is their decision, this is just my feeling, right? My feeling is they should send it to the town because I think, it's a goal of this committee. And, if you want to go in planning and zoning and the planning and conservation development, which this is a part of it,
which
right?
was mentioned.
Is we want to get the whole town to be part of this and we get the part out
Yes.
because we get a meeting. They're not approving us moving forward per se. That doesn't need to be the goal. It may be more of a public hearing than a town meeting, but it's really a town meeting.
So it won't really necessarily be a town vote.
That's up to the Board of Selectmen.
I think it could.
All right, if I could
obviously-
just jump in for a second, Peter, we are
Yeah.
just here to come up with recommendations. We are not a decision-making board. So the fact that
Oh, I
we
understand.
have I know. So what I want to say is that because this does not require a financial obligation of the town, therefore we don't need to concern the Board of Finance. No, I don't think so at all. We are not in a position to do that right now. We are simply here to learn, make recommendations, and put parameters around those recommendations for what the type of commitment that it means to the town, including the loss of property for the commitment of 25 or 30 years. Maybe that doesn't look like a financial commitment at first, but it is. So anyway,
No, that,
I think that we just go forward and see what we want to do next. Thank you very much.
okay, now, do we do we go into a 2-page contract with any vendor, any consultant, I should say, before we get the commitment from the town?
You could do that under the auspice of the Board of Selectmen. They would have that right to do that.
I think.
There are no
I
assets
did
being
we-
utilized.
We can't, as a committee, do it. It has to be done through the Board of Selectmen would sign that.
And,
so-
okay, so you raise that to the Board of Selectmen and ask them, give us some guidance.
Right, but they could do it on their own. They could sign that, commitment letter, in essence, on their own.
Okay.
And
They
how,
don't need a town. That's under their, completely under their.
We just need to make sure that they understand that there is no financial commitment.
Right, but they
Even
wouldn't,
entering.
The big part is I think now, this is Titan. We were also talking about getting another.
yes, there is,
With-
yes.
So,
Green Bank,
Green.
okay,
and they're
So-
they're similar, however, a little different in that Green Bank has actually been set up through the state itself. So it's kind of a quasi-state organization to facilitate solar development in the state of Connecticut. And they also then become, if I'm not mistaken, owner of the asset. And so that whereas Titan never becomes an owner of the asset, it's the installer who's the owner of the asset. Now, Green Bank is not an installer, they'll contract with somebody, but they will retain the ownership of the asset.
We're a private organization.
No, they're
No,
a
it's nonprofit.
state, it's like a quasi-state
Nonprofit.
private corporation.
Were you,
And I've spoken to them already.
and were you able to get, maybe a tentative?
They provide consulting.
Visit?
Of when they could come?
Yeah,
Well, I suggested sometime in May, just because of our scheduling, but I
Okay.
mean,
can we do that? Do you
we
want?
could do that on the next
I
meeting.
I would love to just make sure we turn over any lead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think so, absolutely.
So
given
okay, now, my opinion of tonight's presentation, CCM is an incredible institution.
Yep.
And it's very heartening for me that they entered a 5-year contract and it's up for renewal and they just did another 5 years. CCM is very thorough. They are on top of it and then have been historically for as long as.
So, yeah.
So that's a plus, but I would still want to hear from Green Bank.
Yeah.
Because I
Given
think it's our job in this.
Bit of homework,
Let's vet this every angle that we.
Do we want to formulate some questions for these guys
Well, I think-
now, or do we want to wait to the next
Not
presentation?
right here at
and
this meeting, but
Yeah.
I think let's digest what we
Yeah,
learned tonight. And put together some good questions that we can ask this person when the time comes, when.
Should we consult with North Canaan, who did a lease, the same thing, they don't own it?
We can.
We could, sure, yeah,
Absolutely.
Just ask who
well,
they
I know that
use.
Salisbury is doing a lease, okay? They don't know.
And
We could
I'm
No,
not-
no, I know, but I think they're doing Salisbury. I
Yeah.
wondered if North Canaan,
If
Who
North
they
Canaan
use.
is doing anything, have they? Where?
No, they did. They did.
They
a
did. They did.
one, But I think it's kind of private.
that's private.
So one thing
But
that
the
we talked
town is
about at
doing
the
something.
last meeting was that
Private.
we can go from town to town and ask them what they did. It was the group's feeling that we would be better served if we could get a knowledgeable advisor at low or no cost to guide us through the process, because that would be almost,
I absolutely agree with that. I just didn't know if
Find them.
North Canaan did the same thing.
Correct, yeah.
they are Titan, and I was not under the impression that Green Bank actually did consulting services. I thought they actually directed you to Green Bank, but I'm wrong. I mean, directed you to Titan, but I
No,
definitely-
no. Green Bank is a separate organization.
I know it's a
Yeah.
separate organization.
Yeah, and they do their own separate
Consulting.
consulting.
Okay,
Very
So
similar
let's invite somebody from them.
Okay.
From there and
for our next meeting,
for our next meeting.
which will be,
Well, can you,
okay, well, why don't let's do a tentative date for the next meeting and then I'll try to fit them in, okay?
First 2 weeks in May would be best for me.
Yeah, well, we're doing them on Wednesdays, right? So 2 Wednesdays out is the 1st of May.
May 1st.
Actually, yeah, the 8th would be best.
Well, there is a recreation commission meeting at 7
on
on
which
the
day?
8th,
Well, we're doing 5 o'clock,
but
right?
it does,
quarter of 7 now, so.
So you could fit it
you
in.
guys could all get the heck out of it. Or you could all come to the recreation commission meeting at 7.
You have great meetings, though.
Ours are more
Nice to
fun.
pizza, beer.
Ours are a lot
Okay, let's.
fun.
Do you serve refreshments?
You want-
The 8th is the
Yeah, let's do this. Peter,
Yeah.
if you can reach out
Yeah.
The
me when.
8th.
to Green Bank,
I give them the option of the first or the 8th.
first or the 8th. Does that work for you,
Yeah.
Daley?
Daily?
You're on mute.
No, no, I'm on mute. I apologize. Yes, that's fine for me. We're talking about the first,
Or
First-
the eighth.
first
the
or
first
the eighth.
five.
Yeah,
Depending
Peter
on
will
first-
reach out to them and give them both days.
Hold on.
I'm
Bailey,
sorry.
we're talking about May 1st or May 8th.
So the first works for me at 5 o'clock and the 8th works for me at 5 o'clock.
It will be available via Zoom,
Yes,
because depending on, I think if it's the first, I might have to do Zoom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can do that, no
great,
problem.
thank you, and,
Yeah, that was a huge help, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, prioritize.
I learned a lot from this. So, is any public? No, okay. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Yeah, this doesn't have to be on the minutes, but I think you listed one question is for us as a group to determine sites. Another is, I think we should clearly state what we believe our goals are in asking for help or for this project, like